Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So earlier this year, one of my favorite horror authors released a novel called The Old Lady. Now, I don't know how this didn't make it onto my most anticipated reads of 2024 list, because I literally didn't know about it until after it came out. So yeah, I was definitely delayed in reading it because I just wasn't aware that it had been published, but I did pick it up. I'm a huge Kristopher Triana fan. He is the author of Gone to See the Riverman, which I've talked about endlessly on my channel. He's written a lot of other novels that I'm a very, very big fan of as well. Ex-Boogeyman, The Prettiest Girl in the Grave, Along the River of Flesh. He is typically known to be more of an extreme horror author, but I kind of find his extremities to be, it's not even the right word, his extremeness to be kind of in a world in which I can manage it. He never puts something in for shock value. It is always there to push the narrative, no matter how disturbing it is. And he's very tasteful in what he chooses to show versus tell with his extreme horror. So I do really appreciate that about Kristopher Triana. And again, I need more marketing on what has been released, because I need to know when he has new releases coming out. I do also think that he did just have a book. If it hasn't come out yet, I think it's coming out in August. That will be released sometime in August, I think. And I will be picking that up as well. But today we are going to be talking about The Old Lady. So I'm going to read the back of the book, and then we're going to dive into this. Now, this review will not have spoilers. I've determined I'm going to do some reviews that have spoilers, some that don't. I don't think I need spoilers in this story to talk about my feelings on this book. There's no big twist or shocking reveal or anything like that. There's kind of a twist, but I don't think it's that necessary to my review. So I won't be doing spoilers in this review, but I will be talking pretty in-depth about this. So let's read the back of the book. She never wanted to come home. After the death of her estranged father, Tracy returns to the remote cabin she grew up in. As a traumatized veteran of the Vietnam War, Tracy's father subjected her to rigorous survival training under brutal conditions, believing it was for her own good. She escaped and never looked back. Now in her 50s with a criminal record, Tracy returns to claim the property she's inherited. Hiking through the forest, teenage Alicia and her friends get lost in the snow. They stumble upon a compound run by extremists, and when the teens see too much, only Alicia manages to escape. She searches for help and comes across a secluded cabin. With a panicked girl banging on her door, Tracy is launched into combat mode, awakening her inner demons. Though she suffers from extreme PTSD, she is skilled in combat, making her a deadly adversary, perhaps too deadly. As a snowstorm hammers down, the women must work together to save Alicia's friends from their captors. Alicia has a protector now, but what if this strange old lady is even more dangerous than the people she's escaped from? The Old Lady is a new tale of survivor horror. The Old Lady is a new tale of survival horror from Kristopher Triana, author of Gone to See the Riverman and Full Brutal, and columnist for Backwoods Survival Guide. So I think that last part is very, very important to know going into this. Kristopher Triana actually writes, I believe, for two separate outdoors survival guide magazines and publications. And I've read something similar from Triana before. He had a novella called A Cold Place for Dying that I received in a Nightworms package, I think 2 years ago now at this point. And that was what actually introduced me to Kristopher Triana's writing. And so in this book, you're going to have a lot of real world survivalist skills talked about. A lot of things definitely went over my head, and I had to Google what certain tools were. So definitely be aware of that going into this. For me, this is definitely more a survival thriller with a lot of gore than a horror story. And I think that was my only serious issue with this book. I have a couple other really nitpicky things, but it was just not a book that I would normally have read. Again, Kristopher Triana is one of my favorite authors, so I'm pretty much going to just pick up what he puts out. But this is definitely not the type of horror I usually gravitate towards, and I think I found myself just a little bit bored in what was happening there, because again, it's just something that I don't always enjoy reading. I think one of the crucial things though about this novel that was really cool is the way Kristopher Triana, not only the way that Kristopher Triana depicted Tracy's PTSD, which I thought was really, really well done. It felt very realistic. and just the way that it was kind of corroding and corrupting her mind, and how her fears and the mental illnesses that she had gained through her different anxieties and her truly, truly horrific life kind of got her to where she is at the beginning of this novel. I thought that was very, very well done, and I thought the backstory for her, which was extremely tragic and graphic and upsetting, was again done very, very tastefully, and kind of explained a lot about the things that made Tracy Tracy. Now, one of the things that I really did love and appreciate about this book is most of our characters, most of our main characters, be they the villains or the leads, are extremely morally gray. In fact, the only one actually that really isn't is Alicia. And there's a lot of like gray components that obviously are in Tracy. Tracy has a lot of demons and she's very violent. And then we have our antagonists, who are also very, very violent, very disturbed, very upsetting people. But they all have their own motives for why they are the way they are. And I thought that was very, very well fleshed out. And it gives you these moments where you're like, oh, like you're not 100% bad, or you're not 100% psychotic. Like there are these moments that give all of the bad guys in the story this kind of humanity. And whether you choose to side with them or not, again, we have good and bad guys on both sides, sort of. I just found it very, very interesting, and a kind of a breath of fresh air to not have like the bad guys just be full bad guys and our like quote unquote hero to really not be a hero. Anti-hero is a really difficult word for me to give Tracy, because in my mind she also kind of is a villain. But then even with the kids, we have Alicia and Nori, Marcus, and I forget what the boy's name was, Dylan. Nori, Dylan, and Marcus all let kind of like pride and wrath kind of get in the way of certain things that basically lead to the situations that they all end up in. And I thought that was really, really interesting. They're still innocent and they're still young, so their vices are nowhere near as elevated and evolved and developed as Tracy and all of the people at the compound. But it was interesting to kind of just see the way that Kristopher Triana was depicting humanity in all of these characters. And then we kind of have to really like focus in on this whole situation at hand. Now we have this group of extremists, and I appreciate that Kristopher Triana was trying to bring in kind of modern day horrors of the current state of reality, but it felt so politically driven, and that is 100% his right to do. I don't want to like ever hate on a book because an author wants to put their political views in it, and I'm not even hating on what Kristopher Triana's political views are, but I read horror for escapism, so I don't love reading about the political climate of today's world when I'm reading horror. And this is an issue that I seriously had with Clown in a Cornfield 2. It felt very, 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 very synonymous with today's political climate and a lot of the extreme views that are happening today. So reading a lot of that in this book as well kind of just took me out of like the fantasy of enjoying a horror novel. And that's kind of what, you know, made it scary, is that everything in this book could actually happen. All of these people could actually exist. And Kristopher Triana, again, did really interesting backstories on all of our characters. You really felt very connected to their motivations. Not in a necessarily good way, because again, they're all kind of bad, but like, you understood where all of these people are coming from with their viewpoints, and I thought that was a really, really interesting take. Because he didn't have to do it. He could have just been like, these people are bad because this is what they believe in. But instead he was like, why did they get to these extreme points of view? And I thought that was really, really interesting. And just, again, a really interesting way to create an entire novel of almost entirely morally gray characters that all kind of tend to lean towards the more extreme side of things in a not so great for society kind of way. And yeah, that whole aspect of this book I thought was very, very fascinating. However, again, this was just a book that I don't think was for me. I am not the reader for this book. The like kind of extreme gore and violence in this novel didn't really bother me. There is a lot of trigger warnings in this book. This is pretty much, there's a lot of assault, towards women in this book, it is done in a way in which nothing ever gets gratuitous. It is spoken about, it happens, but Kristopher Triana is always so good at the way he writes those scenes where I never have to worry about being like, I never have to feel like he's exploiting women when he's writing these. Where he writes those scenes very, tasteful is the wrong word because it's not really a tasteful subject matter, but he writes it in a way where he never goes too far with the graphic details. He kind of always fades to black right before like the bad things happen, so he doesn't necessarily write about that. But he then creates reasons for those scenes to be in his novel. They're not just there to, again, create a shock value, to disturb the reader. They are there to explain motivations and actions for certain characters. And I think that is very, very, very important. And again, it's something that he does in several of his other more famous novels. And again, I have never had an issue reading his work because of it. But those are trigger warnings that you definitely need to know going into this book. But I was able to handle what was in there. Again, it's a heavy subject matter. It's a subject matter I don't enjoy reading about. I understand why it was in this book. So take that as you will. But again, this is just a book that I don't think was for me as a reader. The whole survival guide aspect of it is just something that I don't typically tend to read about. It's not that I don't like it, but it's also just something that I can like kind of give or take. The political commentary throughout the whole book was definitely something that I would have preferred to skip just because I don't like reading politically charged novels when I'm trying to read for like fun and escapism. And then of course the kind of awful things that happen to a lot of our female characters in this is again something that just really makes me uncomfortable. So this was a 3-star read for me, and this is not to say it is a bad book. I did kind of debate giving it a 4-star read, but again, it's only because this wasn't a book for me. This is not a bad book. It has a 4.43 rating on Goodreads, and I completely understand why people would like that. It is a very classic Kristopher Triana. It's very fast-paced. There's a lot of action happening. Again, a lot of care and attention to detail in the backgrounds of our characters. And for only being like 300 pages, like you get a lot out of this book. He put so much time and energy and effort into not only crafting the story and the characters, but trying to make it seem as realistic as possible. Like you can tell Kristopher Triana really, really knows his stuff about being in the outdoors and like what to do if you're stranded on a mountain in the middle of a snowstorm. Like you can tell he has that knowledge there, and so that was really, really cool for me to read about. But again, it just got to the point where I started like Googling what a lot of these tools and devices were, because I was like, I actually do not know. But yeah, so if you like Triana, I would say definitely don't skip this book. It's definitely worth the read, but it wasn't the type of horror I wanted it to be. And another big issue that I had with this book is the ending is very heavy. The ending is very, very, very heavy. And it went in a direction I didn't expect it to go. And I was really stunned by that. And when it all happened, I was reading it, I was kind of like, wow, like I didn't expect it to go this way. I don't think I like how this is going. And then having now finished the book and like removing myself from it and looking back on it, I really understand why Triana chose that ending. And it's about 100 times bleaker than the kind of cliche action movie ending I was expecting it to have. And I think that's one of the things that Triana does really, really well, is he's able to just craft something so unexpected and yet so profound in what he's trying to say, in a way that might be very upsetting and disturbing to the readers, but when you think back, like, those scenes linger with you. A lot of what Triana does that I love in his horror is he creates scenes and moments that you cannot get out of your brain. Like, he's very, very good with that. And I think the ending of this novel really trumps everything else because it was so shocking and so unexpected, at least to me, that it's definitely the scene that's probably going to stick with me the longest. So yeah, no, I definitely, like, a 3-star kind of makes it sound like I didn't like this book. And that's not the case at all. It just wasn't, I think, a book for me. There's many other Kristopher Triana books I would recommend before this one, just because they are more catered to what I like to read about. But I still think that this was a beautifully written book. It was a lot of subject matter that I normally don't like reading about. But no, I'm very excited to see what else Kristopher Triana has in store for us. Again, he's become one of those authors that I'm an instant buy. They're like, whenever they release something, it's basically an instant buy for me. And again, when I rate authors that I love, I am always much harder on them than I am authors I've never read before, because I know their potential and I know what they can do. This book, though, it's not that he didn't reach the full potential that he has with a lot of his other books. Again, I think this is a very well written book. It's just not a book with subject matter for me. So there we are, 3 stars. If you're a Kristopher Triana fan and you're okay with the trigger warnings, like if you've read Gone to See the Riverman, you're probably gonna be, and you're fine with that, you'll probably be fine with The Old Lady. Same with like That Night in the Woods, like similar concepts, not quite as jarring and unexpected as the end of That Night in the Woods, but definitely in that realm. Anyways, yeah. Glad I read it. And I definitely think if you're interested in Kristopher Triana's survival horror and you want to see if you would like something in a more of a long format, definitely check out A Cold Place for Dying. I really enjoyed that. They're both books set with people kind of stranded in the woods in the snow, but they're very different takes. So very cool, very fun short story. I think it's available in print right now. I'm not 100% sure. Mine was like a exclusive printing for Nightworm, so I don't have the specifics on that, but definitely check that book out. That one's a really fun one. Anyways, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays, and if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.